Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're tackling a huge and honestly pretty urgent idea: global justice. I mean, think about it. In a world where all our biggest problems seem to be connected, who's actually responsible for fixing them?
All right, so here is how we're going to break this down. First, what exactly is global justice? Then we'll dive into the big philosophical fight at its heart. After that, we'll see how all this theory actually meets the real world in international law. Check out some fascinating court cases and wrap it all up with a massive question that, well, doesn't really have an easy answer.
Okay, first things first. What are we actually talking about when we say global justice?
We live in this world that's just completely connected. Our biggest headaches, stuff like climate change, poverty, pandemics, they don't care about the lines we draw on a map, right? They just cross borders. And that simple fact raises a really fundamental question.
And that's exactly where this idea of global justice comes into play. It's basically a framework, a way of thinking that says, hey, maybe our ideas about fairness and rights shouldn't just stop when you get to a border. It's arguing that real justice has to apply to everyone, everywhere.
Now, this is the really crucial part. It's a huge shift in focus. See, traditionally, we talked about international justice, which was all about how states treat each other, country to country. But global justice, it flips the script. It zooms right in on the individual. It says the most important thing is fairness for every single human being, no matter what passport they hold.
So as you can imagine, that shift in focus kicks off a massive, and I mean massive, philosophical debate. It's all about where our duties and responsibilities really, truly lie.
And it really all boils down to this one core question. Do we have a bigger duty to our fellow citizens, the people in our own country, or to every single person on the planet?
So this debate has two main camps. On one side, you've got cosmopolitanism. This is the idea that we're all part of one big human family. Everyone is of equal moral concern, and our sense of justice should be global. But on the other side, you have statism. This view argues that, no, our main obligations are to the people within our own state. A government's first job is to look after its own citizens.
Now, neither of these views gets off scot-free. They both have some pretty big critiques. Let's start with cosmopolitanism. I mean, the idea of one human family sounds great, right? But critics will jump in and say, look, that's just too idealistic. It's utopian. They'll argue that to actually make it work, you'd need this massive global redistribution of wealth, and that's just not going to happen in the world we live in today. But then you look at the statist view, and it's got its own set of problems. A big one is that it just falls flat when it comes to those huge interconnected problems we talked about. I mean, climate change isn't going to be solved by one country acting alone. And if you're only focused on your own citizens, it can make it way too easy to ignore terrible suffering happening just across the border. And it's because of this tension, this back and forth, that a lot of thinkers are now looking for some kind of middle ground, a hybrid approach.
Okay, so this is all great as a philosophical debate, right? But how does it actually show up in the real world? Well, this isn't just stuff for textbooks. It plays out every single day in the world of international law.
Yeah, international law is pretty much the main arena where these big ideas go to battle. It's where all these philosophical concepts about fairness and rights smash right into the hard-nosed reality of legal rules and, let's be honest, the raw power of different nations.
And we have seen the law change over time. It's been slowly, but surely, starting to embrace some of these global justice ideas. A huge part of that is the rise of international human rights law, which is all about protecting individuals. And think back to the Nuremberg trials after World War II. That was a game changer, establishing that individuals, not just states, could be held responsible for horrific crimes. But, and this is a big but, there's a major challenge. The whole system of international law was built by states for states. It wasn't designed with individuals at its core. And a lot of critics argue that because of this design, and because some countries are way more powerful than others, the law can sometimes end up making global inequality worse, not better. The exact opposite of what it's supposed to do.
So what does this tension look like when the rubber meets the road in a courtroom? Let's look at a few examples that really bring these ideas to life.
Okay, first up, the huge Urgenda case out of the Netherlands. This was wild. A Dutch court basically used international human rights law, the right to life specifically, to order its own government to get way more serious about cutting emissions. So you had a global problem, climate change, being tackled with a global justice tool right in a national courtroom. That set an incredible precedent.
And this case really shines a spotlight on a fascinating contrast. On one hand, you've got courts getting creative and finding ways to push for climate justice. But on the other hand, when it comes to economic justice on a global scale, things like compelling rich countries to help poorer ones, the legal tools are just super weak. There are very few ways to actually enforce it.
And this whole situation, this tension, brings us to a really pivotal moment, something huge that happened in July 2025.
The International Court of Justice, we're talking the world's highest court here, issued what they call an advisory opinion. But it was an absolute bombshell. It officially connected the dots between the climate crisis and the legal obligations of countries. And here's the kicker. It said those obligations aren't just to their own people. They're to all of humanity, and get this, even to future generations that aren't even born yet.
Now, to be clear, this wasn't a ruling that forced any one country to do something specific, but its impact? Absolutely massive. It's basically redrawing the map of international responsibility. It's a powerful signal that the duties of a state are expanding. They're not just about what happens inside your borders anymore. They're becoming truly global.
So when you put it all together, the philosophy, the law, these groundbreaking court cases, it leaves us with this huge unresolved question about where we're all headed. And that really is the big question we're left with, isn't it? If real justice needs someone or something to enforce it, is global justice even possible in a world made up of separate, independent countries? Or does even thinking about this stuff, this pursuit of a fairer world, force us to rethink the entire way our world is set up? It's a heavy one for sure.